Good morning, everyone. How are you doing?
Fine.
Thank you, Bernard. Can you hear me well in the back of the room?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, this is my first time in Israel, by the way. So unfortunately, I don't get to stay too long because of family reasons, but I'm really enjoying the time so far. So yes, I'm going to talk about HTML5. I'm responsible for the interaction domain at W3C, which translates into I'm responsible for the core technology of the open web platform, HTML, CSS, Web API, SVG, graphics, fonts, and a few other things. I have 17 working groups working under me, and well, yes, that's sometimes quite of a challenge. So the web is central. There is no doubt about it. You know, it's accessed by at least 1/3 of the world population today using desktop, mobile devices, especially in third country. It's accessed in many languages as well. I hope, by the way, that the web works well for you guys. And if it does not, well, we're going to fix it. And it is used for all kinds of context, whether it's education, information. We've seen it, unfortunately, even being used nowadays in political context. It's a technology that you can find in a lot of places. Sometimes you do use web technologies without even knowing about it, which is a good thing because as a user, you don't always need to know that you're using it, but as a developer, it's good to know that you can use it in more than one context. And we're linking to websites, use it in our daily life more and more. So the open web platform is a wide set of technologies, and at the heart of the open web platform is the HTML5 technology itself. It's widely deployed in all kinds of contexts, as I was saying earlier, whether it's a mobile, even television as well. I've seen my first television with HTML support back in 2007, actually, which was in South Korea, in the Samsung labs. It's also very powerful. It's used in various contexts in terms of use cases, whether it's for television, but it's also used in electronic books, for example, and I'll come back to that. So what we expect to do, since I was told that I better commit to a date, no, we did say several times since last year that we were going to release a recommendation for HTML 5.0 in 2014. And in fact, for those of you who are trying to follow the work pretty closely, this is a document that the HTML working group chairs released earlier in September after I twisted their arm pretty badly on the timeline for not only HTML 5.0, which is going to be a recommendation by 2014, but also the next version of HTML5, which is HTML so far. We call it HTML 5.1. I'm not committing to that name. And the first draft of HTML 5.1 is going to be released in December as well. And the recommendation for that is scheduled in 2016. So it's like a software. We're going to take a snapshot of the HTML technologies and release recommendation, trying to stabilize the parts of HTML as much as we can as we move along.
Philippe, what is CRLC?
Candidate recommendation is what we're going to release at the end of the year, in December, mid-December. And it means that the specification is stable, and the remaining work that needs to be done between that time and 2014 is testing. In other words, yes, we have a specification is stable, it's pretty nice, but has it been implemented? And for some part, the answer is a straight yes. And for some others, the answer is not that obvious. So a lot of testing is going to have to be done in 2013 and beginning of 2014 to ensure that it's actually implemented. And for all of the parts who have not been implemented, we're going to move them to the next version of HTML. That's as simple as that. If it doesn't get implemented by the shipping date, it's going to be part of the next release. Too bad. You miss the date. And the last call is what we call when we think that the working group believe that the spec is mostly done, and they're inviting comments as well. You'll notice that there is a LC right there. It's mainly for WC process purposes. Don't worry about it. And as you can see, the HTML co-chairs, by the way, sent a call for consensus with the HTML working group last week on November 14 to request a transition to move HTML5 to Korean recommendation. The poll is ongoing until November 26. If you're part of the HTML working group, you are welcome to put your support for this move. But by the way, we're doing extensions as well of the HTML specification already. And some of them are going to be folded back into HTML, and some will stay as extensions. So an example, on the same day, they also release a call for consensus to publish a first public working draft for a main element, which is going to be a new HTML tag introduced in the next version of HTML. So the work is ongoing. So the open web platform is not just HTML5, it's not just the HTML5 specification. If you ask me when the open web platform is going to be done, I'm going to tell you, well, this is an always ongoing project. And this is a living technology as well. This is a set of technologies. The CSS working group, for example, is working on 60 different specifications at the moment. Not all of them are progressing at the same speed, and I'm frustrated with them because some of them sometimes don't move as fast. But this is what we have today. We have a lot of specification. Last year I counted them, it was like 120. It's probably more by now, and it will keep increasing. We just, for example, created a working group for NFC, near field communication, something that is used in mobiles. On the touch front, support for touchscreens, Touch Events 1.0, the API for handling touchscreens is pretty much stable by now, but we just created another working group called Pointer Events, based on the technology submitted by Microsoft to W3C, which is also getting a lot of interest by the other companies as well. And it's supposed to have better support for touchscreens, and also allows more to unifying the model between finger pointing and mouse pointing. So independently of what kind of device, if I may say, you're going to use to point on the screen. So it's, support keeps increasing. The browsers, none of them are fully supporting the HTML specification today. They are keep improving their HTML5 support on an ongoing basis. There are parts of the HTML specs where we are more confident than others. So for example, Canvas is pretty much stable, and is pretty much implemented pretty widely, pretty well. There are some performance issues, no doubt about it. The HTML5 parser is well supported everywhere as well. And so it's available on desktop and mobiles pretty widely. On television, they're a little bit further behind, but they'll get to it as well. And because you have libraries like WebKit, for example, that you can use and embed in your own applications. You can use HTML5 outside of the web browser as well. So on mobile, so there is no doubt that the reach of smartphones keep increasing. And the support for, one of the interesting cases for them is support for video and audio. We started the work a year ago on web real-time communication, which is basically doing video conferencing like you can do with Skype nowadays. And there is ongoing work happening on that, both at W3C for the API and at the IETF for the protocol underneath. I was in Atlanta 2 weeks ago to talk about video codecs within the IETF, which is quite of a debate, if I may say, nowadays. There are at least 2 video codecs that are contenders to be supported by real-time communication. One is H.264, done by MPEG, and the other one is VP8, which is pushed by a company called Google. And so the debate is still open, for sure. The IETF is also looking into creating a working group to define a new video codec that could be implemented everywhere as well. They were pretty successful in doing so for the audio codec already, and they're looking into repeating that success with video codec. And of course, they have our full support on that. As we submitted 2 weeks ago to the IETF, we do support a royalty-free video codec for the web platform. And having one single video codec supported by everyone is not only important for HTML5, but it is extremely important and vital for the success of real-time communications. So this is, one of the mobile providers that we have in the United States, AT&T. They are fully committed to the HTML platform. And this is one of the slides that they're using in their presentation when they actually talk about it. And as you can see, they're using HTML5 as a platform and building on top of it for different set of services. Another industry is a television. For the past 3 years, we've been organizing workshops around television and the web. And actually, the first workshop we organized on television and the web was in 1996. TV and the web, I think that's what it was called. And it was not that successful at the time. People didn't really see the correlation between television and the web. And then when we did the next one in 2010, the first one was in Japan, actually. It was a lot more successful. And since then, a lot of companies have joined W3C for ensuring that the web platform addressed their needs as well. So obviously, the push to move towards open web platform is driven by also the push of the television to move towards digital. I don't know how if you guys are switched to digital over the air here in Israel, but the United States, for example, moved to that last year, and with some, more or less success. But the fact is that if you go to Japan, for example, you will see that there is a lot of integration between the television and real-time television event and the user-generating content, like Twitter, for example. And you can use your television to react as well. Because they also did the extension, and because their market is relatively small and well-controlled, they were able to deploy it on a much faster scale than any other country. So clearly the convergence already started between the web and the television, and we need to keep working on it to ensure that there is proper integration. We created a year and a half ago, following the workshops, a web and television interest group. And they came back with several needs, certainly be able to support use cases in terms of home networking. When you connect your several devices at home is an important use case for them. But most importantly, adaptive streaming and content protection is always at the top of their agenda. I don't need to travel around the world to hear from a video company that you guys need to support adaptive streaming and content protection to make the web relevant for us. It was funny because yesterday I was visiting an Israeli video company, and I was able to write the question for them before they had the chance to ask them. Social networking is another area which is also heavily important for HTML5. So let's take an interesting case, Facebook. So the CTO last year of Facebook came to the Mobile Web Congress conference and basically claimed, we are fully committed to HTML5. It is part of our long-term vision, and we are having an entire platform built on top of HTML5. And one of the things is nearly 50% of their 800 million users, and I'm guessing that he already increased by then, is using the web through their mobile. Is using the website through their mobiles and not the web application. So you're going to tell me, yes, it's all good, but we heard that a guy called Mark Zuckerberg made a statement that HTML5 was a big mistake. Well, are there any journalists in the room? I don't know. But anyway, I like journalists, no doubt about it. But when you make a quote, make sure that you are actually doing the full quote and not just necessarily speak. So in the same paragraph as Mark Zuckerberg was saying that was associating biggest mistake with HTML5, he was also saying that I'm actually on long term really excited about it, which is quite, strange for someone who is saying that it's a big mistake. So if you're really excited about it, you shouldn't say that's a big mistake. And true enough, he probably regretted his words since then. No doubt of it, we're all making mistakes. But there is no doubt that Facebook is fully committed to HTML5. Gaming is another industry which is also interested in the HTML platform. They all have been making HTML Flash games for quite some time, and they like to switch to HTML5 in the longer term as well. One of those companies is Zynga, and which is doing a lot of social gamings, including on top of the Facebook HTML5 platform. And one of their problems is kind of like, thank you, but we don't have Flash available on all platforms. If you remember, a guy called Steve Jobs is kind of like did say that no way they were going to actually support Flash on iPhone and iPads. And I was told that it was an important platform to support nowadays. So, one of the things I like it is the fact that you don't have to install to actually run an HTML5 game on the device, which is not something that all users are actually doing. And they can also do live updates as well when you run an HTML5 game on the mobile. And truly enough, this is still work in progress for them as well. Another thing, and I was speaking earlier, I was talking that you may you're using the web without knowing about it. And one of those cases is the publishing industry. So one of those examples is you have companies like the Financial Times or the New York Times who are using HTML5 every single day because they don't want to be tied to an app store, basically, when they want to make their magazines or online articles available on tablets or phones. And for that reason, because they do want to have full control over their content and how they can update it and how it's being distributed and how they can communicate with their users, they prefer to develop HTML applications rather than developing native applications. And so the Financial Times has been using HTML for their magazine for quite some time, and they're pretty happy about it as well. Another one is Amazon. So if you look at current ebooks format available, whether it's EPUB, whether from IDPF, which is used in several platforms, whether it's iBook that Apple released, I think it was early this year, not last year, and Amazon last year released a new format called KF8 for the Kindle. They're all based on HTML5. And they're all using advanced CSS features. In fact, they're even making extension to CSS all over the place because they need advanced layers for CSS. And CSS is not doing enough for them. So when you are reading an electronic books nowadays, you are using HTML and CSS and on whatever device that, you're using. And the trend trends keep increasing. If you look at where the innovation is happening at WCC nowadays, it's not within the HTML5 specification. As I was saying, this specification is stable. Now it's testing. It's no longer main innovation. No, the main innovation today is happening in groups like CSS or APIs related kind of group. Adobe, for example, started to get highly involved in CSS at the end of last year because electronic books is an important business for them. And they need those extensions that are being actually done in electronic books to be also defined in CSS as well. They cannot run the risk in the long terms that we are going to break electronic book formats because we decided that the web platform would use different, for example, definition in CSS. So they are highly involved in the CSS working group, and they're also committed a lot of code into WebKit to make sure that it's also supported. Because in general, most of the ebook readers nowadays are using WebKit to display the content underneath. We are in the early majority adopter phase for HTML5. And there is no doubt that we get critics on how well HTML5 is deployed today. If you're a developer, you're probably scratching your heads and pulling your hairs off because you're running into bugs of existing implementation. So the work is not done, no doubt about it. And there is still plenty of things that can happen. Certainly today, if you're using a native app, you're getting more performance and you have access to the full platform compared to the open web platform. That's one of the reasons, for example, Facebook decided that, geez, at the moment we're going to ship a native app, is because they were getting bad performance on scrolling when using web technologies. And they came to us and they said, you guys need to resolve that. And we're looking at the case, and sometimes it's a matter of improving implementation. So it's not like we can change the specification to improve the state. It's a matter of improving the implementations. And implementations improve all the time. It's only a matter of time. We didn't get fast JavaScript engine 10 years ago, and now they are starting to be really fast. And so CSS implementations, whether it's animation, transformation, they'll keep increasing their speed every single time. You do have to be a little bit patient, for sure. You know, we do have to achieve broad interoperability. You know, there are still plenty of things that are not well supported across the platforms. Desktop is on the leading front, no doubt about it, but when you're using mobile, you know, you don't get such a nice experience. And we still have requirements from industries that are not being addressed and that we need to address, no doubt about it. You know, so can you use this platform today? I would say yes, definitively. You can use HTML5 today, no doubt about it. You know, and you can learn about what works well or not on several websites on the web today. You know, one of them is the caniuse.com website, where you can go and, depending on which feature you're interested in, it will tell you if it's well supported on desktop and mobiles, for example. You know, and no doubt about it that you can get involved and provide feedback as well. One of the things I have to say is you have to stop writing crappy JavaScript code, because this is going to burn you in the long run. And okay, I can understand that you were doing that 5 years ago, but stop doing that, please. You know, do not try to detect what kind of user agents you're running into when you're writing JavaScript code. Use feature detection instead. And you can use API, you can use libraries like modernizers written by Paul Irish to detect whether a feature is implemented or not on the device without having to write all the code behind it. It does that for you pretty well. No doubt about it that on testing we need to do more. You know, not only we need to make sure that what is written in the specification is well written and stable and implemented, but we also need to perform. We also need to make sure that it's performed well. So several industries, especially in mobiles and television, are highly interested in improving the state of the web platform. So Facebook, for example, last year started their ring mark effort, and they created a community group within W3C, Core Mob, to try to address this problem. The problem with ring mark is like it's shallow testing. It tells you if the feature is there, but it doesn't tell you if the feature is actually well implemented. So they are looking now, right now, are doing a lot more in-depth testing for their platform, for HTML5, to make sure that it's actually well implemented. I can show you, for example, a slide that was written 3 weeks ago by the chair of the HTML testing task force. So this is a task force which is in charge of testing the HTML5 specification. So as of today, we have almost 20,000 tests written against the HTML5 specification. We probably need at least 10 times this amount. And my mission right now is to figure out how we're going to write 100,000 tests between now and the end of 2013. I welcome ideas on that, by the way. But we do get contribution for testing, you know, more and more in the HTML working group from companies all the time. But you know, if you look at the HTML test suite mailing list, it's 16 posts per month. We're going to have to increase the number of resources in that task force quite significantly if we want to be successful. And it's possible to do it. It's not an impossible task. The problem that I have right now is I have companies coming to me and says, tell us how much is this going to cost us, and we'll write the check for you. And my answer right now is like, let me figure out how much this is going to cost. And this is some of the things that I've been doing lately, is spending time with companies, asking them, okay, you guys are going to have to write at least 100,000 tests between now and a year. How much this is going to cost? And it's really, the numbers, doesn't really matter. It's not about writing 100,000 tests. It's really about testing the HTML specification and making sure that we are testing it well as well. You can write 100,000 tests very easily and have them completely meaningless. Adobe has been understand this problem as well. So in the past 6 months, they are trying to motivate the community around the world to write tests themselves and submit that to W3C. So they are organizing the Test the Web Forward events. The first one was in California. Last month they had one in Paris and I think it was in Shenzhen in China as well. So they're trying to get the community around the world to contribute tests to W3C so that we can improve the status of the web platform. When someone comes to me and says, hey, this feature doesn't work well for me, my answer to it is like, well, did you submit tests for that? Because if you don't submit tests for it, then don't complain in a year from now if it is still the case that this feature doesn't work. Web browser vendors, they use our tests. You know, it's like they take our tests, run them against their implementation, and they fix their bugs in their implementations. The only problem that they have is like they have priorities. They cannot fix everything, in a month. So they have to prioritize, and things get fixed over time. But if you don't write tests, there is no way this is going to get higher on the priority list, because it's harder to figure out for them that something is broken. Another thing that you have to be careful, and which is also highly controversial nowadays, is privacy. With all those nice features such as geolocation, navigation, timing that we are providing to you, it's becoming easier and easier to track users on the web. And let's face it, a lot of the web industry nowadays is making money out of that. In fact, if you're looking into web browser vendors company, and especially the main 5 ones, which are Mozilla, Microsoft, Google, Opera, and Google, 4 of them also owns a ad platform. So they are making money out of ads and tracking you. And this is becoming a concern, especially in Europe with the European Commission and in the US with the White House. So we've been working on technologies for a year from now on tracking protection, so that you as a user can indicate whether you want to be tracked or not. And the controversial part here is not the technological part here. This is about the meaning of what does it mean not to be tracked. And this is highly politically loaded. We even had the US Congress to send a letter to the working group to tell them they had to be careful. It's not every day the United States Congress sends a letter to one of our technical working group. I can tell you about that. But this is how politically loaded this is, because there is a lot of money into this industry, and a lot of companies are highly worried about the implication of not tracking their users. So what's missing in the picture? A lot of things. A common video codec is still pretty high on the list for some companies out there. As I was saying, the IETF is trying to resolve the problem for real-time communication. But understand that the video codec that they may agree on might be good enough to do a Skype video conferencing, but it might not be good enough to use premium content on the web, such as HD content or even 4K content in a few years from now, if we have enough bandwidth. So another thing is control of adaptive video, whether it's adaptive streaming or live streaming. The good news on that is we're working on it. The HTML working group has started the work 6 months ago on the media source extension specification to allow you to have fine-grained control of streaming of the video content. And I'm hoping they're going to release the first public working draft of it by the end of the year. Delivery statistics is something which is highly interesting because we want to know how well we are able to deliver the content to your device. And Google submitted a proposal called Stats API to the WebRTC working group on that 4 or 5 months ago. I was in California 2 weeks ago for a workshop on web performance where we also discussed statistics there, and especially post-processing statistics of video content. And that's something that we are going to look into the web performance working group in the next 2 years as well. Media content protection. So this is something that some people consider to be evil, and this is something that the video industry considers to be a sine qua non condition for them to use the HTML platform. And the HTML working group has been working on an API to allow you and to interact with the DRM layer implemented by your operating system for the past 6 months. No doubt about it, the day they're going to want to publish the first public working draft, you're going to see fireworks in the working group, because there are some people in the working group do not like such an approach. And what it was particularly funny because we had one Google employee when companies submitted a proposal for this approach. We had one Google employee who indicated it was unethical for the WWDC to work on such a technology. The irony here was that the proposal was submitted by Google. So there is no even consensus within organizations sometimes on whether this should be done or not. But the fact is, this is a sine qua non case that have to be addressed. And so my position is like, yes, I can understand that some people may have problem with it, but geez, if we're going to have to do it, we better have a standard for it, rather than leaving the mess out there to be done and not run into interoperability problem because it was simply not a good thing to work on it. But there are other issues. You know, interoperability is something that I keep talking about, and it remains a high concern for me as well. But there are other cases that need to be addressed, such as accessibility, identity and access control on the web. And luckily, that one is not in my domain. I only have to fix HTML5. So how can you participate? Well, we have several ways you can participate in the W3C. And those are three of them. Community groups, joining the W3C, of course, and the webplatform.org. So community groups is a mechanism we created last year to allow the community to flourish new ideas for the open web platform, where basically 5 individuals from wherever they are can create a community group and work on an idea and gather community and interest for an idea. And I don't know how many community groups we have today, over 70 or something like that, 82. And not all of them will be successful. You know, if 25% of them are going to be successful, that's good enough for me. And, but at least it gives a forum for anyone around the world to try to promote an idea on the web. And it allows you to give some patent protections over your idea as well. So that's easier for others to participate as well. So if you have an idea and you believe that the web should support it, then go and create a community group for it. You know, another way to participate is, of course, to join W3C. Very often I get companies who come to me and say, why don't you do this at W3C? You know? And I'm like, well, we're working on it. There is a working group working on it, like content protection. Well, we have the HTML working group working on it. And so they're like, okay, good enough, we don't need to participate. But very often I also hear later on, they're like, geez, that's the solution you came up with? You're kidding us, right? And I'm like, well, where were you when we were working on it, actually? So do not count on others to necessarily address your use cases. If you really care about your use cases and want them to see well addressed within the consortium, well, you're going to have to join and participate and do the work. And at the end of the day, that's what it takes, people to do the work. Lastly, we just launched last month the webplatform.org. This is a wiki. We want developers to use the web platform properly. And because this is your web, you know, we are relying on you to document it. So this is an effort which was created with several organizations, you know, Mozilla, Microsoft, Facebook, and so on, where we want to create a wiki that will document the web platform as is being used today, with examples and so on like that. We don't expect you to necessarily read specification to know how to use a feature. So on that, I should stop. Those slides are online, by the way, if you want to actually go and access them. And they will stay there indefinitely. I don't know if I have time for one question or two. I'm being told yes, so if you have a question or two, you feel free to come to a microphone. Otherwise, feel free to come and talk to me afterwards. I will be around all day long.